Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to the 143. Coming at you live with episode 156. This is Under Review.
Got a doozy for you. We are tapping into the NFL playoffs. Kind of crazy because it seems like just yesterday the season was underway, and now, not that it's coming to a close, but we're kind of at that point where the football games are limited.
Yep. With each week, we will have less and less games. As much as we love the playoffs, we hate that the season's coming to an end. With each NFL playoffs that roll around comes another anniversary of Under Review as well. We are approaching 3 years. Every week since the beginning, giving you your sports content. And,
Absolutely. Not missed a week for almost 3 years as of next week.
Hey, knock on wood. But it's about to be 3 years. So, yep, welcome in. We're giving you the playoff preview. Wild card weekend is upon us. I'm going to be honest. Wild card weekend's a pretty fun weekend in the playoffs. Just because there are still games at pretty much every slot, or there's a game at every slot, but they mean so much more now. So we're going to preview these games for you, but we'll start us off with the stat of the week brought to you by our sponsor, Andrews Logistics. Mike Evans hit a career milestone this past week, snagging a ball with I guess it was the final play in the Bucs Saints game.
Like 20 seconds left in the game.
9-yard catch. They had to get him that to break 1,000 yards for this season. In doing so, he now has 11 straight seasons of 1,000 receiving yards or more, tying the greatest receiver of all time, in my opinion, Jerry Rice's record of 11 straight 1,000 receiving yard seasons. So Mike and Jerry are now tied. Mike, little tidbit for you actually, has not ever not had 1,000-yard receiving season.
And that brings to the player of the week. Mike Evans had to be done. I mean, it was a milestone. We were saying a couple weeks ago they need to get him to his 1,000 yards just because he had gotten injured during the season, missed a bit of time. But into the season with 1,004 yards, been in the league 11 years. All 11 years, he's at 1,000 yards. And
Yep.
I saw some people complaining on Twitter after the game, saying that they force-fed him that last game of the season to get into 1,000. But the other thing you have to put into perspective is he only played 14 games. So it's not like he played every single game and was right there and they just force-fed him to get him over the edge. I mean, he only played 14 games. So realistically, he plays all 17 games. I mean, he would have hit it easily. They were, I guess, technically trying to I'm putting that in quotes, force feed it to him at the end because they wanted him to get that. They didn't want him to miss out on that milestone, but I mean, that's pretty impressive. He just kind of flies under the radar just in terms of being a receiver, but he just racks up these 1,000-yard seasons, one right after the other for 11 years straight now. It's ridiculous.
I mean, it's more like 13, 14, because he was doing it A&M too. He didn't have a single season without 1,000 yards. So he just goes to work, gets the job done. And I don't want to hear anybody saying but Jerry had 16 games to do it. It's like Mike Evans normally hits his 1,000-yard mark.
He did it in 14 this year.
Yeah, so he did it in 14 this year. Look, nobody's debating that Jerry Rice is better than Mike Evans, okay? Nobody's saying that Mike Evans is better than Jerry Rice. But this is a pretty great accomplishment. And, it deserves to be mentioned that with those catches he had and the 1,000-yard season that he got on Sunday, he got a $3 million incentive bonus as well. So it's not like they were just trying to make history. They were trying to get him his money. So you got to love Baker Mayfield and the rest of the team making sure that Mike got his bag.
And let's bring it on in. All right. First game we're going to talk about, Texans-Chargers.
Yep.
Okay. They were playing on Saturday at 3:30. And I saw something that every wild card game the Texans have played in has been a 3:30 Saturday game, which is kind of crazy. Just purely coincidental. I don't really think it has anything to do with anything. But
I do think it has something to do with something. It's that Houston's market Houston's fan base is not very big. Like, you would never see Dallas getting that 3:30 wild card game. Just saying. So I know we're not in. I'm not taking a shot at Houston. I'm just saying that's why, like, the Texans fan base and the Texans market and Chargers, their fan bases are not very big, and that is why they got the 3:30 slot.
But it's kind of a big deal for the Chargers because they had somewhat of a breakout season that wasn't really expected. I mean, people knew that, John Harbaugh was going to turn the Chargers. They were hoping he was going to turn the Chargers franchise around, but I don't think it was really anticipated that it would be this quick. Justin Herbert found himself a good one in Ladd McConkey, who's been having a really, really great season. He was a receiver that kind of, I feel like, snuck up on a lot of people. Didn't really expect him to be as good as he was because you were looking at guys like Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr., but then Ladd McConkey's right up there with the best of them. But I think the Texans have been somewhat on a little bit of a decline towards the end of the season. I think the Chargers have been playing some really good football. So I'm expecting Justin Herbert to handle business in Los Angeles.
I agree. I'm going to have to pick the Chargers as well in this game just because Chargers have been playing really well offensively and defensively. Defensively, they've had one of the best defenses all year. Texans putting up a measly 2 points against the Ravens. And, I just watching them in prime time recently, the Texans have not looked great. C.J. Stroud having a bit of a down year.
He looks different.
Yeah, maybe that sophomore slump a little bit. They've had injuries plague them, and I think the Chargers go in and take care of business. Steelers, Ravens.
Houston has a really good roster, but it's just like they just don't seem to be clicking as much as they did last year. Like Joseph said, they're kind of injury-ridden. C.J. Stroud looks different. They missed Nico Collins for a little bit. They missed Tank Dell there at the end. It's not looking the same as it did last year.
And when
the offense losing a little bit of its luster.
When the offense isn't playing as well, the defense will start to decline as well. I mean, you just got to have a reason. The defense, if they're on the field most of the game like they have been for Houston, I mean, they're going to be worn out. So I think the Chargers should take this game, but you never know. Come playoff time, this is your 0-0. The regular season doesn't matter at this point. Maybe Houston comes in ready to play. I like both of these teams and both of these quarterbacks and both of the coaches, but I think the Chargers take this one as well. Steelers-Ravens, this is your classic rivalry AFC North matchup here in the playoffs. I think the Ravens take this game pretty easily. The Steelers have looked just not very good as of late. They clinched playoffs basically like 5 weeks ago, and since then they've been losing. I know Mike Tomlin keeps getting them winning seasons, but if they lose to the Ravens here, I mean, do they make any changes? Because they have not been winning in the playoffs lately.
I mean, yeah, that's the biggest deal for them. Every single season is Mike Tomlin getting a winning season, but at what cost? Because they have not been a contender in a very, very long time. Yeah. Yes, they've been winning games, but, I mean, they barely sneak into the playoffs, and then they get smacked in the wild card round and get sent home.
It's not necessarily Tomlin's fault. I will say that defense is always ready to play, but the offense, they cannot figure it out in Pittsburgh with the offense. I mean, right now, Pickens is dropping balls. Russ is throwing it all over the place. They just don't look good offensively.
How it's been for the last kind of few years, it seems like, in Pittsburgh is all the games they've won have been in spite of their offense. I mean, they've had – their defense has been tremendous for a long time, but it's just they've never been never really been the same since, like, you had your prime Ben Roethlisberger, prime Antonio Brown, prime Le'Veon Bell, all that stuff. Kind of struggled finding a quarterback there for a bit. Thought Mason Rudolph was going to get in there. He didn't do the job. Kenny Pickett, right. They had Justin Fields and they had Russell Wilson, and there's still just something missing there offensively that they got to get figured out because they have such a good defense that it's just kind of getting wasted, it seems like.
The Ravens
all-world player in TJ Watt. He's going to retire as one of the greatest defensive players to ever play the game, and he just doesn't have a lot to show for it. He's got a lot of individual defensive accolades, but as a team, they're not winning anything.
Yeah, I think the Ravens are also they're clicking in everything right now, just at the right time. So, they've been steamrolling teams as of late. The Ravens are a lot of people's Super Bowl picks. I just think the Ravens are. I mean, this is their first game, and we'll be seeing the Ravens. Probably, I would say, we'll definitely see them next week, I think, and maybe even conference championship. So, the Steelers have a lot to figure out. Like I said before, it's 0-0 right now. Maybe they go in and take the win, but I would say the Texans have a better chance of winning on Saturday than the Steelers do. Broncos-Bills, your 12 o'clock Sunday slot. Broncos, the Bo Nix, Sean Payton connection has been great. A lot to be said about Sean Payton turning the team around, especially with all their cap trouble and everything. Sneaking in with that 7 seed. The Broncos have been playing great ball lately, but I will say they're going into Buffalo. The climate will probably be more on Buffalo's snow and whatever else they like up there. And this Bills team is looking legit this season. But like we said before, Josh Allen has always struggled when it comes to the playoffs. So, Sunday starts the first kind of his first test this year to try to prove that, it's bigger than just the regular season for him.
And, the other thing, too, I guess Denver, something you can think about is a lot of times with these Buffalo games, we're used to seeing them being in the cold. I think Denver, they're somewhat, acclimated to that cold climate up there, being in Colorado. Maybe not quite as bad as Buffalo, but, this isn't like when Miami went up there last year and they're used to 80-degree tropical weather. But Bo Nix has been putting on a clinic. I think he's a good candidate for your offensive rookie of the year. We kind of talked about that a few weeks ago, whatever that was.
Won it,
but it's nice to see the Broncos kind of hitting their strides again with a franchise quarterback. Bo Nix looks great. Sean Payton really seems to like him. They seem to be getting along together well. But yeah, Buffalo's just been ridiculous this season, led by Josh Allen, who's putting on an MVP campaign caliber type of run. But like we've said before, we're used to seeing this from Buffalo. Excellent regular season, but then when it comes time to the playoffs, they kind of shy away. They get a little bit of an easier game to start out with, round 1 of the playoffs and playing the 7 seed, but, you can't take anything for granted.
Yeah, I'm assuming your pick is Buffalo as well. If Buffalo and Baltimore both win, that's who we'll be playing the next week. So that'll be a good one if that's what happens. And so essentially
a rematch from earlier in the season when the Bills low-key got embarrassed by Baltimore.
That would be a good one. And the NFL does reseed after each round. So pending an upset, that is what would happen. But it looks like the winner of Texans-Chargers will most likely, pending an upset, play Kansas City. So regardless of what happens, we'll get some good games. I'm also picking the Bills. I mean, it's a 2-7 seed. Normally the 2 seed is supposed to win those games, especially at home. With the one exception being Dallas Cowboys last year, getting beat by the next team we're going to talk about, Packers and Eagles. Could both of these teams just lose, But we got to pick one of these teams. Packers are a depleted, injury-prone team, right? They're plagued with injuries. They lost Christian Watson, one of their best receivers, to an ACL. It's going to be a tough game for them to win, but I don't think it's impossible. But also a little tidbit, as of right now, Jalen Hurts is still in concussion protocol. He should be playing Sunday, but if he stays in concussion protocol a couple days longer, it'll be up in the air. So
the other thing too with the Packers is they're still a very, very young team. You see all the weapons they have. They have the potential to be extremely talented, but still just very, very early on in everyone's career. Obviously, as Cowboys fans, not super excited about this game because it's just one of those things where you'll watch it because you like football, but you don't really care about either team. Um, I think this one could possibly go either way.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, the Eagles are going to have that slight edge, but I do think Green Bay could very well go into Philadelphia and take it to them. I mean, who knows?
Here's what I
We know
think.
what that's like firsthand.
No, we do. And here's what I think would be hilarious is if the Eagles get beat and they didn't play Saquon. A lot of people wanted Saquon to play to break that record last week against the Giants. He didn't play. They sat him. He was only 100 yards away, 101. I think it'd be hilarious if they lose this game because then they sat Saquon for no reason. And Nick Sirianni would definitely probably get fired. Philadelphia would hate him for that decision because also they would lose round one. I'm picking the Packers here just because I would love to see the turmoil that would be Philadelphia after a loss like that.
Oh, absolutely. It would wreak mayhem. It would
Yeah,
be so funny. But the next game is the one that I'm kind of looking. I think is going to be a really, really good
be a good game. I agree.
Buccaneers Commanders, Baker Mayfield versus Jaden Daniels. You know, we've seen Baker Mayfield find himself a home there in Tampa Bay.
Yep.
That offense looks pretty good. And then Jaden Daniels started out the season extremely hot with Washington, but then was kind of up and down there at the end. But he ended the season, I think, playing some really good football.
Yeah.
Terry McLaurin kind of had a tear in the second half of the season for him, despite a couple weeks, or other than a few weeks. But I think that is going to be one of those games where it could go either way for the teams.
I do too. I'm rooting for Tampa Bay because, I can't root for the Commanders. But, I like what I've been seeing from both teams, kind of like you said. Marshawn Lattimore versus Mike Evans, those two hate each other.
One last time.
Hated each other, for a long time. So that'll be a cool matchup to see. I'm hoping Mike gets the best of them. But, these are the kind of games where you get to the playoffs, you need your quarterback and star receivers to shine. This is not normally where some guy comes up out of nowhere and makes plays. These are your stars needing to show up in the big moments. And so, I think it'll be electric to watch. I think Jaden Daniels, I don't think, he'll get, those freshman jitters or whatever, I think he'll play pretty well. He's seen some ups and downs this season, like you were saying, and he's kind of come alive here at the end of the season as well. So we'll see. And two pretty good defenses as well. So it'll be, I think, yeah, I agree. It's the matchup I'm looking forward to most as well out of all of these.
Just because I think of all the games we're seeing, this is probably the one with the most potential to go either way.
To be pretty tight games, the whole way.
It seems kind of set who the heavy, favorite is. Rams Vikings, they have Minnesota barely winning that game, just in terms of odds and the spread. But I just don't see it necessarily with the Rams. I'm giving it to Minnesota. Obviously, they had a bad week there at the end of the season, but
that might be helpful for them.
I do think they're a team built for a deeper playoff run. They've been playing some really, really good football all season. Sam Darnold's been having a great comeback year for him, getting a starting job kind of at the last second, unexpected. You got Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, Aaron Jones. This is just such a talented roster where I just don't think the Rams defense is going to do anything to stop that offense. And then, just like Joseph said, their defense has been very solid throughout the season, obviously, with the last week 18 kind of being the outlier. I think this is still a team built to do something deep in the playoffs.
Watching the Rams play this season, they've had literally one thing, and it's just get the ball to Puka Nacua. I mean, if you look at the game against the Cardinals a couple weeks ago, he had 100 and something receiving yards. Everybody else maybe had 20. After that, You take away Puka Nacua, and it could be. I mean, it'll hurt Matthew Stafford a lot. I'm not saying they don't have weapons. I'm just saying that's the guy he looks for, and I think the Vikings will scheme to take him away. It could be a good game, but I also think the Vikings win this one pretty easily.
It just seems like, too, when I'm watching the Rams, those wins just look ugly.
Yeah,
you know?
they're not great.
They're just not playing pretty football. I don't know. Maybe that's just because I made up my mind that Minnesota's winning, but I just don't really see the Rams doing anything that significant.
We've been Sam Darnold supporters all season. I think we both kind of wanted to see the Vikings win last week, and they just didn't show up. There's something to be said about that, but the thing is, I think that'll get them ready. Now they know, they're kind of riding a high, then they got punched in the mouth. It's how are you going to respond? I think this week they're going to come out swinging, and they should at least come out swinging. Sam Darnold was overthrowing everybody. So it's not like the guys weren't open. He was just missing everyone. Just everybody seemed off for the Vikings on Sunday night against Detroit.
Who knows with all these predictions? We kind of predicted that the Vikings would somewhat hand it to Detroit last week, and the complete polar opposite happened. They got it handed to them.
Which Detroit is an amazing football team, not to take anything. And the reason we said Detroit was going to get it handed to them is because their defense was awful. Well, Alex Anzalone decided to play, and their defense was stellar all game. So maybe he was just that missing piece. They needed some of that leadership in there. The defense looked like a completely different team against Minnesota. So, just something like that could happen.
Which flipped.
Yeah, something like that could happen with any of these teams. We're just making our predictions based on what we've seen here in the last because you don't look at the entire season. You definitely look at the last 5 weeks to see how a team is trending. Like the Steelers, they've lost 5 straight. It's just one of those things. But playoffs, new season, new week. There's everything at stake, win or go home. So it'll be a good weekend. Wildcard weekend is always a lot of fun.
Everybody's 0-0 right now. Obviously, your season dictated where you're seated at and who you're playing, but it's a brand new season. So, you got to make the most of the short period of time you have left. You can't take anything for granted. And I'm excited. I'm really looking forward to these matchups. I think we're in for some really good football this weekend.
Agreed. Looking forward to it as well.
So here's to end our shows on Under Review. I brought you a quote from the Vince Lombardi, and he said, "Winning is not everything, but making the effort to win is." And that's the truth.
Ain't that the truth? Thanks for tuning in this week. We'll see you next week with another episode of Under Review.